Yaga Africa is a non-profit organization promoting participatory democracy, human rights, and civic participation. It has also become one of the most recognizable units in election monitoring in Nigeria and Africa for how things are panning out in Edo State. I'm now being joined by the founder and executive director of Yaga Africa, Samson Itodo. Samson Itodo, great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. Good afternoon.
Well, Samson, yesterday, Yaga Africa issued a statement. Midday, Situation Room also issued a statement, in the afternoon, around 2 p.m., talking about, what election observers had seen in Edo State. I know Yaga Africa covered about 300 polling stations and then gave a report of what happened. Now, subsequently, I've also seen another report from the Situation Room with a coalition of groups observing the election, Electa, Yaga Africa, other groups, Kimpact, there's Kimpact Development, there's Nigerian Women Trust Fund, all those groups saying that, look, there's something wrong with this election. Let me start by asking you, what did you guys observe so far?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Abati, and good afternoon to everyone. The Edo governorship election started, it's ongoing, and the process, we understand, it will soon be concluded by the Independent National Electoral Commission. There were 3 major tests that underpinned this election. The first was a resilience test, and that was whether voters were going to turn up in their large numbers to cast their vote for candidates of their choice. Unfortunately, they didn't pass the resilience test because the turnout, for this election is very, very poor. At Yaga Africa, just this afternoon, we released our turnout projections for this election, and we believe that turnout will be between 21.5% with a margin of error of 1.5%. Now, that is a sad note for this election because we thought and expected that there will be huge turnout for the elections and give, the Edo people who know the carry last the opportunity to show up. But perhaps they didn't show up either because of the rain or due to some issues, but they didn't pass the resilience test. The second test was the integrity test, and that's the one that relates with election logistics as well as the transparency of the results collation process. Like you noted earlier, this election saw a joint statement issued by civil society on the collation process. Now, let's make no mistake that this election has been peaceful from the conduct of the accreditation and voting yesterday morning. It was a relatively peaceful election. The processes were complied with, the voting and accreditation processes. Yes, there were a few isolated incidents, no doubt, but the process was largely successful. Where we started observing, issues that are hot on the integrity of the process was last night when it was the result collation process. We have cases where, results collation was disrupted, by thugs. Security agencies prevented observers, and party agents, and including media from accessing collation centers. We also saw a situation where results collation didn't happen at the local government level, even though there was no provocation to warrant, a relocation of the collation to the state collation center. INEC officials were also intimidated, in some of the collation centers, and that was what prompted the joint statement issued by civil society organizations, especially those observing this election, that this process has been peaceful and seamless, but the collation process in some of the local governments have been problematic, and we called on INEC, to take action and invoke the powers it has, that for those results that have come, from the collation centers that were disrupted, it is important for INEC to review those results to ensure that they don't undermine the integrity of the process. And INEC issued a statement this afternoon stating its position and also reminding stakeholders, especially security agencies, that accredited observers, media organizations have a right to be at the collation center. Dr. Abati, the other sad story about this election is the level of vote buying that we observed in this election. Votes were trading for as high as 10,000 naira per voter. And it's just disappointing what we saw at the polling units yesterday. And so if you check, this election would largely be determined by the highest spender, and which really hurts, the legitimacy of the outcome of this election, because you can't say that whatever the case is, it will be a purchased outcome and not necessarily a reflection, of the free choice of people. And the fact that this happened, the vote buying happened in the presence of security agencies in some of the polling units, is very disturbing, despite the assurances given by the security agencies that they were going to arrest and reprimand defaulters. But the EFCC, we must commend that institution for the arrest, that they effected on those individuals that they caught buying votes at the polling units.
You very clearly. You say this process has been very peaceful. Maybe we give the credit to the security agencies. Maybe we give the credit to the people of Edo State. But you are questioning the integrity of the process. We are questioning what is likely to be the final outcome of the process. In the statement issued by the coalition of observer groups, the Situation Room, Electa, TAF Africa, Yaga Africa, Nigerian Women Trust Group. Okay, there is a paragraph there that is saying INEC has to invoke Section 65 of the Enabling Electoral Act. Are you saying that the results that have been declared so far are not true, are not acceptable, and there are issues with what has been announced so far?
I'm not saying that the results announced by INEC so far, are questionable. For two reasons. The first is what we have said in the statement is that INEC has a power to review declarations and returns made by its officials where those declarations have been made involuntarily or in contravention or contrary to the provisions of the Electoral Act and its guidelines. That's what the law says. And so what the collation officers are doing, and the returning officers, the collation officers, is they have come to the returning officer to report what happened at the local government's area and the wards. Now, the returning officer will now look at these issues, and the statement that INEC issues are very clear, that a report needs to be forwarded. So if any party has any issue with the results already declared, they should be reminded that they have the opportunity to file a report challenging, those results. So I give a classic example. If overvoting occurred in a polling unit, the consequential action is to cancel that particular polling unit, especially if the case is not a computational error, because if there are computational errors that can be addressed, then that can be fixed. But if it is not, and it is clear that it's a case of manipulation, the election will be cancelled. Now, for cancelled polling units or polling units where elections did not hold, it is important to clearly state and provide, that information, and then the returning officer will take action on it. One of the things that we are worried about is cases where there is prima facie evidence that overvoting occurred in ABCD polling units, and the results were not cancelled and they were tallied in the final results. That will undermine the credibility of the process. The second point that needs to be made with respect to this result is when a declaration has been made and the only person who has the power to make a declaration is the returning officer. If a declaration is made, the law provides 7 days for the review. And in this case, it is the commission. And the commission involves the chairman of the commission and the national commissioners. And so everyone who is challenging any results already declared, since they have party agents, and we, in the data we released yesterday, that both the two major parties had party agents in all the polling units. So, excuse me. So we expect that they will tender, their complaints to the returning officer, and you will consider all this before a declaration is made.
Okay. Samson Itodo. Now we have this situation in our hands. What are you recommending? In specific terms, as Yaga Africa, are you saying specifically that this is an election process in Edo State that cannot be trusted? Are you saying that from your observers, you had persons in about 300 police stations, that you think this is a sham election? You have praised the EFCC. Are you likely to praise INEC? Are you likely to praise the police and all the other security agencies, 43,000 of them that were on the ground, including, DIG Frank Mba, who was there on the ground? General comments in terms of the performance of the institutions.
Well, Dr. Abati, the process is yet to be concluded. We are still following the process. That even if the outstanding 3 local governments, are announced in the ongoing collation process, we're still going to follow the process through. So, for instance, we wait to see what will happen to a local government like Ipobaoka, where the results were not collated at the local government level. We're also going to see how INEC is going to respond to issues where results were declared contrary to its guidelines. So we are watching. So the process is not yet concluded. So we cannot, pass, an assessment, a comprehensive assessment on the process. As you know, Yaga Africa deployed the process and result verification for transparency methodology. We already have, our data. And we're looking at our data and keeping watch on what happens. And if there's any fraud along the way, rest assured Yaga Africa will, unravel that in our final statement. But as it stands, the process was peaceful all through yesterday until last night. The process was seamless all through. The BVAS function, save for the logistic challenge that we encountered yesterday, this has been relatively a very good process. But then election is a process. If we have to wait to see the collation process and how it goes, and if there are fundamental questions that hurt the integrity of the process, then we cannot say at the end of the day that this was a better election compared to other elections.
Yeah, but in any case, this is an off-cycle election. We do not expect that the security agencies deploying 43,000 personnel, INEC putting all its ad hoc persons at work, that they will not be able to manage a one-day election, and all of that. So maybe, maybe the civil society is guilty of overpraise.
I think the point about security agencies also needs to be clear, because despite this huge number, of deployments, There were cases yesterday where INEC could not deploy because there were no security officials. There was uneven distribution, of security personnel. You go to a polling unit that was densely populated, you'll see one or two officers deployed. So what happened to the 40-something police officers and security agents who were deployed for these elections? These are critical questions that we must highlight. There were also cases of intimidation. There are observers who they were questioned and intimidated by security agencies in the course of their work, despite having their identity flag with them. And so there are issues that we need to highlight, but we cannot pass, an excellent assessment on the security agencies at the moment, because this process is still on. But when you start hearing reports of security agencies preventing party agents, preventing observers and media organizations from accessing collation centers to the extent that INEC issued a statement reminding stakeholders, it really tells you that there's so much work that needs to be done around, the reforms to our electoral process and the role of security agencies in elections.
But Samson Itodo, I would like you to comment on the role, either positive or negative, of disinformation, misinformation in this electoral process in Edo State. Because we've seen all kinds of things on social media. I've also seen a video, coming to the studio of APC governors, singing victory song, whatever. I don't remember what song they were singing. So this disinformation, how do we deal with it? And the bigger issue of electoral reforms, because it looks like we're not learning. We keep going from one problem to another, even in all-cycle elections.
I totally agree with you, Dr. Abati. It looks like we're not learning. In successive elections, we've seen how 24 hours before election day, you have fake news about candidate withdrawal. To the extent that there were fake court orders or court judgments that showed up on social media yesterday. And that is unacceptable. The nation needs to rise.
Okay, Samson, I would like to come back to that subject. We've been talking to Samson Itodo, founder and executive director, Yaga Africa, who is on the ground in Edo State and who has been monitoring the process with his team, monitoring, the polling stations across the state. Samson Itodo, thank you for staying with us. Samson? Okay, yeah. We just listened to Azegbemini, and he's saying that the kind of results being posted by INEC are questionable. You told me earlier that the process has been seamless, but he's saying that the PDP is raising objections, also about collation, also about the results that have been announced, discrepancies between number of registered voters and the number of announced results. We've been on this since yesterday. What do you have to say with regard to this?
Dr. Abati, I listened to the press conference and the briefing that the PDP just made. I think that political parties need to understand that there are laid down procedures, for registering their complaints and their grievance. Now, the INEC guidelines is very clear, when it talks about when a report is received. So if parties have issues, the reason why they have party agents at the collation center is to furnish them with all the necessary information. And then the party agents can then draw the attention of the returning officer, to those polling units that they are challenging the outcome or the declaration or the results from those polling units. Now, since they are party agents, across, and each party agent is entitled to the Form EC8A, is to look at those Form EC8As and present those, to the collation, the returning officer. And I think that the returning officer also has, a duty to look at these issues and not rush through this process of collation. You have to meticulously consider the issues being raised before, finalizing or concluding this process. But even when the returning officer goes ahead to declare, the commission also has, 7 days, to review. And so if after the declaration, any party that has any issue can submit a report, can submit a petition, and raise the issues and provide reasons and evidence that establishes their case. And that way, INEC can take action. But don't expect that the Electoral Commission will suo motu, act without any formal petition or report before it. And this shouldn't just be oral. It should be documentary, because the commission is a legal entity. And so the interaction that you have with the commission, especially in a process that is guided by rules, you need to strictly follow the rules so that you don't sabotage your own chances as a litigant or as a victim.
Okay, Samson, one final question before I let you go. You have said the process was peaceful, seamless, and all of that until yesterday evening. Do you have any fears as an election observer about the likely outbreak of violence in Edo State? Because what we know in the literature is that violence can come before, during, or after. Do you think there will be peace in Edo State and it will be well with the people of Edo State, whatever the outcome that is declared by the umpire is?
I think that the people of Edo State know very well that violence has severe consequences, and so political actors need to act responsibly and not make comments, that would heat up the polity. We've seen some protest. People have a right to protest, but they must do so peacefully so there's no breakdown of law and order. I think that this is the time that even the returning officer and the collation officers and all those who are involved in this process need to be, one, transparent, they need to be meticulous, and they need to be inclusive in their decision. I think that if questions are raised, people have a right to raise those questions, but responding to those questions in a way that is respectful, that also inspires confidence, is critical. And this is why we urge the returning officer, we urge INEC, like it has stated in a statement, to manage this process in a way that it inspires confidence on the part of people. And if any party or any candidate does not believe and has grievance, there is the legal and civil means of doing so, hoping that when the time comes for that, their lordship and the judiciary will act to protect the will of the people that have been expressed through the ballot.
Well, the judiciary, their lordships and the judiciary protecting the will of the people. That's a question that I will leave you with, and I would like to thank you very much. Samson Itodo, founder and executive director of Yaga Africa, for joining us on This is Live, the Sunday talk show.